Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the services, strategies, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm Chief Content Officer and Channel Analyst and Channel Master of the organization responsible for the show. I am joined as I am every week, but this week, live and side by side by your other co-host, Eric Simpson, our Chief Strategist at Channel Mastered. Eric, how's it going?
It's going great, Rich. Let everybody know where we happen to be today together for the first time in a minute.
We are at DattoCon 2024. Specifically, we are at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami in the podcast room that the good folks at Kaseya have set aside. But this week, we are attending Kaseya's DattoCon 2024 event, where there are a lot of people and a lot of things going on.
A lot of people,
Yes.
and a lot of things going on, and a lot of announcements, Rich.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, let's just dive right into the story of the week. It's the biggest announcement to come out of the show, but you're right, there are a lot of others as well. Let's kind of turn the clock back briefly to the Kaseya Connect show at the end of April. There was huge news coming out of that show when Kaseya announced the launch of something they were calling Kaseya 365 or 365, which was an endpoint-focused package of services for MSPs, RMM, EDR, endpoint backup, all the services that you need as an MSP to support endpoints for your customers. Well, the big news some months later here at DattoCon is another SKU of Kaseya 365. This one is called Kaseya 365 User. So the one that they rolled out in April is now officially Kaseya 365 Endpoint. It is joined in what I think we have to call the Kaseya 365 family at this point by Kaseya 365 User, which is a user-focused security package. And so you're going to get SaaS backup in there. You're going to get anti-phishing. You're going to get dark web monitoring. You're going to get security awareness training. And you're going to get what Kaseya calls cloud detection and response. So sort of think SaaS security. That piece of Kaseya 365 User is based on technology that Kaseya acquired along with SaaS alerts. And we've spoken on this show before. I've certainly written at my blog, Channelholic, many times about SaaS alerts. One of the surprisingly few pure play SaaS security vendors out there with an MSP orientation. They are now part of Kaseya. Their technology is bundled into Kaseya 365 User at no additional cost. Which is saying something, Eric, because the cost of Kaseya 365 User, if you consider everything that I just listed that's in there, sort of like Kaseya 365 Endpoint, which was kind of crazy cheap, $3.99 for the whole bundle, $1.75 if you exclude the MDR. Kaseya 365 User is coming in at a promotional price of $2.79 per user per month. That is a promotional price. At some unspecified point down the road, the price goes up. It goes up to $3.75 per user per month. $3.75 for all those technologies that I talked about. And I need to point out that at the show in the spring, Kaseya announced what they're calling their Partner First Pledge. There are a lot of pieces to that, but one of the pieces to that is there are limits. There's a hard cap, basically, on how much Kaseya is allowed to raise prices on these Kaseya 365 solutions. They cannot, will not raise the price during a contract term. At the end of the term, all they can do is inflation plus 5%. They don't have to do that. That's the maximum that they are allowed to do. So these are very cost-effective, affordable solutions right now that will remain cost-effective and affordable down the road. And so, yet again, disruptive pricing from Kaseya in a package of services that are really core to what MSPs do for their clients.
It's very disruptive, Rich, and very strategic. When you think about the brand IT Complete, what they're trying to do is fulfill that name. They're trying to include everything that a typical MSP would want to bundle and deliver to their clients from an endpoint perspective and from a user perspective. And remember, they also included DNS and web filtering in with that Kaseya 365 user license.
Well, that's actually something that they added to Kaseya 365 endpoint. But at no extra cost.
Oh,
the
wow.
the $3.99 that stays the same, but you also get DNS and web filtering now.
So what was very, very striking to me as I sat through the same presentation you did, and then I sat in kind of a deeper dive of all the different solutions, was this idea that for less than $10 a user, $8 a user, maybe $7 a year, depending on where you come in, your cost to cover the basics from a security perspective and from a endpoint management perspective, and then layering on top of that some of the AI news that they dropped today, which makes it much more efficient and lessens the cost of labor for technicians and reducing errors and doing things from an automated fashion. It's mind-boggling. Now, when we hear Fred Vacola say that, their mission, Rich, is to increase the profit of MSPs to as close to 35% as possible, when the statistics that he shared today reflected that in general, the average gross profit margin of MSPs is about 10% when you compare it to like attorneys that are getting 40% or accountants that are getting 30%. So this gives MSPs a leg up and a fighting chance to really compete and then cover all of those basic needs for their cost being, $8 or so per user with everything in there. And then to increase that margin for what they ultimately bill their client for, and then focus on more strategic initiatives to help clients, grow their businesses strategically. So just amazing information, amazing news. And then the acquisition of SaaS Alerts was also kind of the October surprise, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. And I want to quickly talk about the AI piece of that, because when Kaseya 365 Endpoint came out in April, Kaseya was really focused about the pricing. That was the story around that, and the profit opportunity that opened up for MSPs. They really didn't talk. They mentioned, they certainly, it didn't hide the fact that there was AI and automation built into that, but it wasn't sort of foregrounded the way AI and automation have been with Kaseya 365 user. And I interviewed Fred Vacola yesterday, and I kind of understand why that is a little bit now. And Kaseya itself has been a little bit surprised by the degree to which MSPs have adopted, embraced, and in their words, the MSP's words, benefited from the AI and automation technology that Kaseya has introduced. So much so that the vision that they sketched out in April around the Kaseya 365 family was, the average MSP is doing 10% margins now. We believe that there's on this 4-step plan that's probably got another year to go, and when we're at the end of those 4 steps, we'll get them up to 35%. When I spoke to Fred Vacola yesterday, he said, based on what we're seeing around AI and automation right now, we actually think that by the end of the decade, we can get MSPs to 40 or 50% margins. So they've sort of upped their target and their optimism about what they can accomplish based on AI, which is interesting.
Well, when I saw the integration with AI and some of the tools, including IT Glue and RMM and things like that, I mean, just that level and just kind of like the first, in my words, toe in the water of the AI capabilities that they are releasing now, it's apparent that it's going to save technicians and MSPs a ton of labor, because the RMM knows where everything is, and IT Glue can do this discovery and then take over and do activities and add things and document things in a way that I've never seen before. So yes, AI can be used for the purposes of good. And I think Kaseya sees that and is putting it into place to give their partners an advantage.
So that is a long-term strategy for Kaseya, which is a lovely segue to your tip of the week, which has to do with hiring and the long term.
Yes, and actually, the tip of the week is based on a panel that I did with Travis Britton and Jason Eshelman yesterday during Autotask Community Live, and it was all around hiring strategies for long-term success for MSPs, Rich. And I'll just share three tips that I shared yesterday. So, MSPs are challenged from a scalability perspective, obviously from a profitability perspective, and getting the most efficiency out of their teams, and also reducing churn and reducing burnout, and making sure that we get the right folks in the right seats on the bus during hiring. But then, of course, afterwards, how do we, reward them and keep them engaged and things like that. But I'm just going to talk about the hiring process itself. So the first tip is having every single role in the organization, whether it is filled today or not, that the organization predicts it will need to grow. So imagine today you've got a team of 10 folks and everybody's wearing 5 hats, right? So where are those hats in the org chart that when we can get to the point of maturity that we can hire somebody to take on that role? What is that role? What are the requirements for that role? What is the compensation? And how is that role's performance measured? So that gives the existing staff an idea of where they can grow in the organization, kind of a succession strategy that's apparent, what they need to do to upskill, to compete for that role, and then how they'll be compensated. And it also allows new prospective applicants for a job at that MSP to see that there is a plan for growth for the organization and to see that there is a future for them as well. So it gives them a competitive edge during the hiring process that way. Number 2, I'm a DISC certified, I guess you could say, behavioral analyst. I've been using DISC. It's a behavioral assessment tool like Myers-Briggs, like Strength Finders, and I use it to help our clients during the hiring process, but also for team building. And what it does is assesses how a person is naturally wired. So how do I behave when I'm not at work? And then how do I subconsciously adapt my behavior to do my work role? And when our natural wiring, our comfort zone, matches very closely with what our job role requires, I'm a much happier person, right? I don't have a lot of mental fatigue. I'm in my sweet spot, right? I enjoy what I'm doing more because I'm good at it. It's what I'm comfortable doing. When someone whose job role is far apart from their natural behavioral style, that's what we call their adapted behavior, then subconsciously we adapt. It's not something that most people are aware of unless they've been trained and can see this. But what happens is when you're doing something that you're not comfortable doing a lot, right? Kind of tends to slip to the last thing on your to-do list. You kind of do it probably not with all the gusto and heart that you normally would, right? And it's mentally fatiguing. We've all done that once in a while. Like I remember, helping friends move. Like, I can't take it. I don't like it, but they're my friends, so I'm going to do it. But boy, after I do that, I'm just fatigued. I'm mentally fatigued, not physically, right? So same thing happens in the work world. So the idea here is that when you're hiring, implement a behavioral assessment of some sort that allows you to gauge what that applicant's natural comfort zone is, and make sure that the position that they are applying for matches closely. And if not, is there another role in the organization that would fit them better? Now, this works 2 ways, Rich. It works when you're hiring, but also works for existing team members. So but I do a lot of this when we're doing team building. We assess the entire organization. And I'm looking first for folks that are adapting way outside of their comfort zone to say, hey, how is their performance? If it's, erratic, it's because they're attempting to do the role and they're getting fatigued and the performance suffers a little bit. So I look out for that, and then I make suggestions. Well, can we have them move to another seat on the bus that more closely aligns with that? And it's really successful at that point. So use behavioral assessment tools, number 2. Number 3, what is the onboarding strategy for a new employee? When we onboard new customers, right, we have a checklist. We know what to expect the first week, the second week, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then things like that. We need to have the same thing for new employees. What are the expectations? What do they need to do? And what do we need to do to make them successful the first 30 days, the next 30 days, and the final 30 days? Kind of like that probationary period. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that the new hire understands their role, what they're expected to do during this period of time, and how we're going to measure it at the end of that time to make sure that we can then make full use of them in their full role. If we're just kind of doing employee orientation and things like that, understanding infrastructures and documentation, our PSA, our ticketing system, and all that. So that is really critical. So many times, Rich, I see folks just hire folks and just working with a client right now, Rich, who in fact just basically says, oh, our onboarding process, we have them sit with 4 different people for a week at a time and watch what they do. And probably could do some improvement in that strategy.
So three quick thoughts. I like all of that there, and it all kind of calls thoughts to mind. And so, first of all, every MSP in our audience appreciates the importance of getting onboarding right with the client, and they know that if you get that right, you're setting yourself up for long-term success with that client. If you screw it up, you're really setting yourself up or making it difficult to forge a long-term relationship. So it makes perfect sense and really should make intuitive sense to the MSPs in our audience. You have to think the same way about your employees. Onboarding is critical. The part about avoiding friction in the role and aligning the personality type with the role, it called to mind a book I read. It's got to be a couple of decades ago now, but it was called First Break All the Rules. I don't know if you remember this, but I loved it at the time because it was based on this massive poll that the Gallup organization did to study what works and doesn't work in hiring. And I'm a numbers guy, so I was all over this. This was not just generic business advice. There was data behind this. And one of the key things they found is that companies that hire really well for long-term success align the person to the role. And so, it's very simple stuff in some examples. You don't want to put an introvert into a sales role. If you're going to be dealing with people all day long, that's going to be exhausting, whereas maybe an introvert is perfect for like a security analyst kind of role where they're off on their own and they're doing that. So getting that alignment right, absolutely critical, not just for MSPs, but for everyone. And then last but not least, I really like that first piece of advice because in the past, when I've written about the characteristics that very successful high growth MSPs have in common, one of those characteristics is they built the business to grow from the get-go. So they started out as one person, 2, 3 people, and only a handful of clients. But they're choosing an RMM system. They're not going to buy something small. They're going to buy something that will grow with them. And building an org chart in that way, anticipating growth and setting yourself up for that, even if it's not going to happen next month or within the next 6 months, it's a really smart thing. And it accelerates growth for the companies that are on that path.
Yeah, so many thoughts here, but I want to keep it, brief. It also helps you to establish milestones to justify when you need to hire that next person. Like sometimes, we have that conversation with MSPs to say, well, do I need to hire another technician first or a salesperson first? So it kind of gives you the ability to visualize that and to set some milestones and then adjust them of course, over time. The second thought that I have is, when we first do that hiring and we're aligning that new person into that role, some things that I find happen over time, Rich, and I'm going to call it role drift. I call it scope creep and scope seep, but this kind of role drift, like, oh, I was hired to do this role, right? But you talk to somebody that's been there for 3 or 4 years, and now I'm doing all these other things, right? So it's really important to keep that in mind when when you just need somebody to come and tag in and help that friend move. Like, don't make that their full-time job, because that's not what you were hired to do, right? Just keep that in mind and make sure that anything that you kind of add someone to or promote them into maintains that alignment with their natural behavior.
Well, look, we are at DattoCon 2024. Kaseya 365 user is the big news from DattoCon 2024. Well, guess what? We have got Mike Puglia. Our interview guest is Mike Puglia. He runs the security product suite at Kaseya. He's going to be with us in just a moment on the other side of the break to talk about Kaseya 365 user and all sorts of other good things security related. Stick around, folks. We are going to be right back. And welcome to part 2 of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, our Spotlight interview segment, where we are live at DattoCon 24, and very pleased to be joined by the general manager of the security suite at Kaseya, Mike Puglia. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I've been patting myself on the back all day here because we scheduled this interview well in advance before we knew what the big news would be from the show here. I had a hunch it would be security related, and I was exactly right. So you are the perfect person to have on the show today. Now, for folks who have not met you before, just give them a little idea of who you are and what you do at Kaseya.
Sure. I've been at Kaseya for 11 years now and counting. I'm the general manager of all of our security products. I've worn many hats over those 11 years. We've gone from 300 people to 6,000 people in 11 years. Prior to that, I've worked at Salesforce.com and a number of other security companies, and I don't want to tell you how long ago that was.
So the big news, obviously, today was the introduction of Kaseya 365 user. And I want to just test a proposition out with you, because I'm of the mind increasingly that user security, cloud security, and security in general are all becoming increasingly synonymous, that the biggest security challenge MSPs deal with are cloud-related and user-related challenges. Is that the view from Kaseya as well?
I think they are. If you look at whether it's cloud or user security, which gets into email and Microsoft 365 and Google, you have something that's available 24/7 from anywhere in the world to reach all of your employees. And essentially, that's usually the front door on the way they get in. So you have to make it accessible to everyone, but you have to do your best to keep the bad guys out.
Now, we heard Fred, at this conference and last year as well, talking about how, Kaseya is on a mission to help increase the profitability of its MSP partners and its partners overall. Kaseya 365 user is very low priced. Now, how much of a factor did cost come into the conversation in terms of increasing adoption by your partners as well as by their end customers?
I think it's a big part of it. You saw this revolution in productivity software back when it was Office before 365. If you're old like me, I used to buy a copy of Word and maybe a copy of Lotus 1-2-3 because I'm from Boston. And they fundamentally changed how productivity software was consumed. Why do I need 25 different products from potentially different vendors? We are much larger here, which I kind of mentioned earlier on. The amount of buying power we have to lower our COGS is significantly different at the size scale we're at now than when we were 300 people, with one office down the street here in Miami. And now we have buildings and buildings. And that allows us to pass that on. It makes it easier for our MSPs to say, this is how much I'm paying for every single user. And it allows them to either pass on a certain amount of savings to be more competitive, or, to reap a much higher profitability. But as Fred went through over and over again it was kind of eye-opening to me, because I didn't think of it like this. If you look at a small to mid-sized business, they outsource IT, they outsource legal, they outsource, bookkeeping, finance, their CPA. On average, lawyers, if you look at lawyers, they make about a profit margin of 40%. CPAs, firms make about 30%. And MSPs on average make about 10%. There's something wrong with that equation. And given our size and scale, we think it's a win-win for our customers and partners, and also for us.
I'm going to give you a shot to address 3 sort of likely common objections that might come out of there. One will be, at that price point, there have to be trade-offs. I mean, they have to be compromising on something to deliver that much functionality at that price point. Another is that price point looks really great today, but sooner or later, they're just going to kind of jack that up on me, and I'm going to wind up paying a lot. And then the third is, I like the price point, but I'm concerned about putting a lot of eggs in one basket. So those, I think, are going to be the kind of top 3 questions that MSPs ask. What do you say to?
Sure. I'll start with the middle one first. I won't go in order, and then you'll have to remind me. In terms of, actually, I'll start with the first one first. We'll go that way. In terms of, price being too low, that they can't innovate at that price. My answer to that is yes, we can. The size and scale and our costs, believe me, we are making enough margin at those prices. The size and scale of us and the ability of our COGS on the back end, we have been meticulous about this for the last 8, 9, 10 years of bringing down that cost. We aren't a single product company. They have to make all their money off of one single product. That includes sales and marketing, all the, every Google ad they're running and all that. They have very high costs of sales and go to market. You can look up some that are public in the security space. They are incredibly unprofitable, some of them, but they're growing fast. We are extremely profitable, and we're able to do that. And I can, as someone who's been here for 11 years, and my team is multiple size than it was, when it started on each product. Your second question was around the
so the concern that the price looks great now, but wait until they.
So we have our Partner First Pledge. One part of Partner First Pledge is we are guaranteeing in all of our contracts that we can only increase prices the CPI plus, doing it for math, up to 5%. That doesn't mean, normal CPI is, if you know anybody with Social Security, it's maybe 1%. But that doesn't mean we are automatically doing that. That means that's the maximum we contractually could do. So if you have a 1-year subscription, a 2-year subscription, a 3-year subscription, your price is exactly the same for that 1, 2, or 3 years. And at the end of your term, if you were to renew, which we would hope everyone does, at most, the price is going to be CPI plus. And we've seen software companies go way above that, 10, 20, 30%. I'm renewing one right now, actually, that's significantly higher for our own stuff. So it is contractually locked in that we're making that pledge. It's not just take our word for it. And number 3, putting all your eggs in one basket. From a security perspective, it's something I get a question on, from a lot of customers. What if I have everything with you? And I think there are 3 probably pieces of that question. One is, are you going to be around? And the answer to that is yes. We are financially, viable. Unlike almost every, I've been at lots of companies over the years. We are doing very well, and you can see the growth rate over years and continued acquisitions. Number 2 is, are you going to, once I'm locked in, are you going to increase my price? That was the answer I just gave. It's contractually, we can't. within CPI. My lawyers would like me to say CPI plus up to 5%. Doesn't mean we would do it. Just means that's what we could do. Number 3 is security related. What if there is a compromise? Does the whole thing come down? And what I like to say to customers is that we have done something a little bit different. Every company has had security issues, including us, but we are modular in that as we have brought on companies, in a lot of cases, in a lot of companies I've worked with, you merge everything together and you have one product, and now your one product is bigger. So one vulnerability or issue brings down everything. We have purposefully built each product as their own entity. So IT Glue, for example, Nadir Merchant is founding CTO. He's still running IT Glue today. And they have their own team. It's an order of magnitude bigger than it was when he was the founding CTO. They have their own team, their own code base, their own test environments, their own production environments. We connect them as part of Kaseya 365 through APIs so that if there is a flaw in software or somebody compromises, somebody backs up a truck to the data center and walks out with everything, that is only one of the products. The APIs allow our customers to have that in their control, because we have some customers that say, I want to connect everything. And we have others that say, you know what, RMM is probably, from a security perspective, touches the most things. I'm going to leave that out there and I'm going to log into it separately. It gives you that ability to do it. You might have to, it's common security piece, right? You might have to do a little more in terms of work, but you're isolating something. So it gives you that kind of flexibility.
Well, Mike, amongst a lot of the announcements today, one of the things that I keyed off on was the audience reaction to the announcement that DNS and web filtering is going to be included in the Kaseya 365 user license. Why is that so significant to the partners?
I think, it's kind of twofold. If you're going to get a lot of requests in most organizations. Hey, I don't want the team, depends what company you're serving, but I don't want the team on social media all day, or I don't want, I don't want them on gambling sites. I don't want them on adult sites, certainly. And we have malicious sites, which of course nobody wants. So the ways to do that have kind of grown up over time. You used to go out and buy a web proxy that just did that. You had that on site, but that becomes kind of irrelevant in this day and age because people aren't sitting there physically in the office. There are great tools out there where the whole product, the whole company is DNS filtering. And that gives people the flexibility to very easily say, I don't want people on malicious sites, gambling sites, whatever, off we go. And I've added another layer of protection, but that comes with a pretty big cost. So we have built it into Kaseya 365 directly into our AV product. So when you set an AV policy, you can set their web policy as well, and it follows them around. As long as they're using, their computer, it follows them wherever they go.
Yeah. So we were both at the, now it's Kaseya 365 Endpoint launch in the spring. Most of the discussion around that product when you guys launched that was around the price point, around the margin implications and the business opportunity that enabled. That was obviously a very big part of the Kaseya 365 user story today. But there has also been more talk than I remember in the spring about AI and automation and the value that adds to the product. So, give folks a flavor for what your AI and automation technologies can do in Kaseya 365 user.
Sure. I would say twofold. One is when we came up with Kaseya 365 for endpoints and now for users, so basically you get 2 licenses, you got pretty much what you need. We focused on, hey, we're going to do this at a price that MSPs can be extremely profitable, and we're profitable too. But that's half the story. It's the story that makes the news. It's a story that's easier for us to talk about as well. But the other half of the story is the efficiency gains through automation, through AI. But of course, those are not always concrete to realize, right? Oh, we're going to save you 4 hours a week, 3 hours a week. We've all seen that. We came out with the hard hitting, here's cash dollars, but the other half of it is all these automations. So you have your traditional automations that we announced, where I think we gave the example, if you're using our phishing simulation product, it will automatically send it to our phishing protection product and put it in their mailbox. You don't have to go out and put all these rules to bypass all the security you put in place so that you can do phishing simulation. That's something that might save me 15 minutes every time I'm going to do a campaign for a customer. It adds up over time. The thing that was really exciting to me was a lot of the AI that we talked about. And the AI, to me, it's become like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, every product known to mankind or service had cloud written in it. And I was still thinking it was frame relay, which many of your viewers probably won't remember.
Now you're aging us.
I know, now we're getting up there. But now everything says AI. I mean, everything. I think like pizza shop and, AI pizza. The reality is there are AI that is useful and meaningful. And so we looked at how can we help without making it, if somebody could cut and paste something into ChatGPT just because they can do it in one place in the product, that's a little better, but not really much of anything. So we've been building AI components out, calling them Cooper Copilots. So we have it in IT Glue. One of the things that IT Glue does is it documents your systems. And when you do what's called flexible assets, you manually go in and say, oh, this license key for this software product is attached to this network, server. And that's all great. And it's brought a lot of value. But AI can do that better than a human being can. So it can, in the Copilot, it has auto match. It will run AI, match it all up, and then you can approve it. In ticketing, there's a big lift, I would say, in terms of ticketing. One of the things that Gen AI is really good at is summarization. You've probably seen it in Copilot and Microsoft Copilot and others. Tickets have, you look at a ticket, you probably spend your most amount of time reading the 250 notes that are on the ticket as it's been bouncing around for days, weeks, months, whatever. Having a button that summarizes it using AI, it's night and day. It's really good at that. So that's right in our auto task ticketing. But we also went out and got, pulling out of the ticket, a summary for the end customer written in simplistic language. So it will summarize the ticket and give you a response. Still we could make it just go out like a chatbot, but still having a human look at it and say, yeah, I want to go with this. And having another button right in there for a Copilot saying, simplify this technical disaster, into human language. And it will do that. And it will read through the ticket, and it will also put in remediations using Gen AI. So I think it's the first thing that we're really doing that's besides the traditional automations is using the Gen AI where it's visible to the MSP to do the things that they like, that can really make a difference. In that, if you add customers and you add techs at the same rate, because it's linear, your profit margin will never increase. You might be huge, but that's what it's going to be. So can you level up the people you have by using Gen AI? And we built it right into the product.
Yeah, I sat in on a deep dive of the AI component and the demonstration of it, and it was amazing to me. I mean, this is where we're going to save these technicians a lot of time, but also what I liked, what you just said, Mike, about sending, an update to the end user in a way that is consistent, because everybody has their different way of writing updates and statuses, things like that. So this provides a consistency, a customer experience, right? And, building out service desks for a long time, I appreciate that. And I appreciate sometimes technicians aren't the best at, typing and verbalizing in a consistent fashion.
I would agree, and I'll even use it in my own daily, right? I use it in Word. I'll write something, and then I'll highlight it and say, make this better. And I should have paid more attention in high school, but it was, it tweaks it only a little bit, but it makes it so much clearer to someone who is actually reading it. So it can be really helpful.
Yeah. So, during today's session, Fred stated that Kaseya's security suite is its fastest growing by far, were the words that I believe he used. So how is Kaseya leading with that? Is that something that now has taken such precedence in the minds of business owners and the providers that support them, that you see that as a competitive advantage to lead with that story? How are you guys using that in relation to getting the word out and delivering this message?
I think there are some things that are happening in the industry, right? There's kind of our win. Why is it the fastest growing? Because MSPs are consuming cybersecurity services. Why? Because their customers need it, right? So there is some wind at our back. I'd like to say it's all the features and functions and acquisitions and things like that. But if you look at any of the analysts they start doing them now at the end of 2024, right? For 2020 predictions for 2025, every single one, and it was the same in 2023, is AI and cybersecurity. Those are the two leading things that are happening. And both of those are dripping down into the SMB space. So I would say we don't necessarily lead with cybersecurity. It's we lead with, we're an infrastructure and security software company, and we're here to serve MSPs, and they may want to get Kaseya 365 and pull it off the shelf and have all the tools at their disposal. Or they may want to buy things, individually based on their customers' needs. But I would say that MSPs are changing in terms of how they go to market, where a lot of them are differentiating on the cybersecurity front. You see it, I'm sure you see it with all the MSPs, they're leading with cybersecurity. It's a great way to get their foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And really over the past several years, there have been a lot of either products we've launched or acquired to help MSPs demonstrate their value to their existing customers, but also attract, prospects. So, for years we've been using rapid fire tools, Network Detective. People have been doing network assessments as part of their prospecting and saying, look, here's where you are and here's what we can do. And we just announced we had acquired 2 years ago, Audit IT, a sales presentation software. We're merging the Audit IT in so it's a little less technical and more visually stunning. We acquired Vonahai, which is automated pen testing. And the reason we did that was so that MSPs could, instead of they get a call from their customer and their customer says, I'm being told I have to do a pen test, insurance, some customer I'm working with who's bigger, a variety of cyber regulations, whether it's CMMC or HIPAA or what have you. And usually that money walked out the door. They'd go call a consultant. Now they can fill that inbound demand. But the thing I didn't anticipate as much, which I should have, is a lot of MSPs are actually using a pen test to prospect with their customers, to find the holes. And so we introduced, we talked about it here, but it's about the middle of the summer. We introduced a prospecting mode where you can run a full pen test. It's going to give you summary results, not something you would hand to to fulfill an audit or something like that, but going much deeper, because it comes back with, I compromised this machine and here's a screenshot of it. And so we introduced prospecting mode. So you can run, I had to pick a number and I picked 20 a month, right? When you have the product, you can run to 20 prospecting a month. I figured, not counting weekends, if you're doing one pen test a day, call us, we'll figure out a better deal, but that would be a lot of prospecting. So we're giving them those tools so that they can lead with those. They can demonstrate their level of competence. We were able to compromise your systems. Here's your network. They can give their prospects something of value, and then they can sell their follow-on service.
So we're just about out of time, but you mentioned you guys have just in the recent past acquired Bonahai, you acquired AudIT. You've also acquired SaaS Alerts. There is a cloud detection and response component in Kaseya 365 user that is 100% based on SaaS Alerts technology. You had the option to build, to buy. You bought that company in particular. Why?
So when we look out there, one, is there a problem that they solve? And I think, yeah, absolutely. Every MSP has had a customer with Microsoft 365 where it's been compromised for a variety of reasons. Because if I can get in there, I can get into the sweet stuff. So you see that. SaaS Alerts is done, and we've done a lot of monitoring with our own Rocket Cyber product. SaaS Alerts kind of goes to the next deep level. But I think the other part is we think in terms of usually Microsoft 365, and some MSPs think about Google, but most of your customers have, Salesforce, Salesforce.com, Dropbox, Box.net, all those other SaaS apps. And most of our MSPs aren't dealing with that at all. And for all the stuff you see going on with attacking their Microsoft accounts, if they have Salesforce or they have Dropbox or all the other apps, they're in there too. We just don't deal with it. You'll be able to expand what you're monitoring for that customer. And you look at how fast they have attracted, and that's it. That's where the rubber hits the road. How many MSPs have purchased their service product since they started? And it's been a ramp like this. And so that speaks for itself on why we made the decision to make the acquisition. We did a similar thing with Bonahai. We said 500, they hit about 500 MSPs. Now, SaaS Alerts is growing faster because of the SaaS, but when 500 MSPs buy a product with a very small team, small marketing, what have you, going to shows like this, there's something there. I mean, it's just, they're not handing out money for, oh, I'll try this, here you go. And so there's a definite need in the industry. We tend to think in terms of Microsoft, but it goes to all the SaaS applications that your customer is using. They've gotten a lot of traction with MSPs, and we have good alignment with the company. Known Jim for a long time. He used to work at Kaseya, and he used to be a Kaseya customer, and so he's their CEO, and we think there's great alignment between the companies.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Obviously, a very busy conference for you and everyone else on the executive team at Kaseya, particularly anyone associated with security. So we thank you for taking some time out and joining us. For anyone in the audience who would like to learn more about you, maybe get in touch with you, where should they go?
You can ping me at Kaseya. It's Mike.Puglia, Puglia, at Kaseya.com.
All right. Mike, again, thank you very much. Folks, we're going to take a quick break here. Eric and I are going to come back on the other side. When we do, we'll share a few final thoughts about this conversation you just heard. Have a little fun, wrap up the show. Stick around. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of the MSP Chat podcast. Very interesting conversation with Mike. I appreciate him taking the time. As we said before, I kind of kicked it off with a question about user security and cloud security kind of becoming synonymous with security generally. And there were a few reasons for that, why that I have that thought, and that thought is on my mind. So first of all, and we probably should have said this earlier on in the interest of full disclosure, Channel Mastered is the organization responsible for the show. SaaS Alerts, which Kaseya has acquired, is a Channel Mastered client. So we know those guys pretty well and their technology. And in fact, I just recently wrote a research report for them based on some research we did with MSPs about security. A lot of interesting findings in that, one of which was MSPs told us that they are more concerned about cloud vulnerabilities than they are ransomware. And phishing and business email compromise attacks placed a little bit higher than cloud vulnerabilities, but it was a bit of a step down from cloud to ransomware. So that tells you that there is rising concern, rising awareness that cloud security is kind of becoming security generally as everything moves into the SaaS world and infrastructure as a service into the cloud. The other thing is, yesterday at the show, Eric, I had a chance to interview John Murchison. He's the CEO of Blackpoint Cyber. And it just in passing, at one point in this interview, he tossed in something that was really kind of striking to me. He said at their SOC, for every on-prem security attack that they register 16 SaaS attacks, mostly in the Microsoft 365 world. But it gives you a sense for where the threat activity is. It is overwhelmingly in cloud and specifically in SaaS. And so, it makes a ton of sense that this was an area where Kaseya really kind of invested, not just in security, but specifically in user-oriented security, which is how you do security in the cloud age. And they actually went out and bought SaaS alerts to build that in because that is such an important part of the security workload for MSPs now.
Rich, it makes me wonder that if this new realization that, SaaS applications are the threat, the real threats now over, phishing and things like that, is a result of companies like SaaS alerts, like kind of leading the charge and identifying and monitoring these cloud applications. I think for the first time, they're 3 years old, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
So, now we shine the light on that, and all of a sudden, holy cow, that's where it's coming from. When, in prior surveys that we've done, phishing has always come up as being the top concern, for ransomware and vulnerability and things like that. But as we're moving more and more of our workloads to the cloud and using more and more of these SaaS applications, obviously that's where the bad actors see the opportunity now.
Which is why it's been so striking to me for such a long time that there aren't more companies like SaaS Alerts out there, specializing in security for SaaS and for MSPs. There just aren't a bunch of them, and Kaseya now owns one of the very few. So one of many very interesting developments from the show. Leaves us with time for just one last thing, ladies and gentlemen. And as you are watching or listening to this broadcast, it is probably just past Halloween. We're actually recording it a day or two before Halloween. But we've got one last thing for you that is sort of seasonally appropriate, and it comes to us from Greg Schultz. Greg is my go-to expert on storage and BDR. He has been for years and years. He also lives and works in Stillwater, Minnesota. And he recently posted on LinkedIn about a tradition in Stillwater that I was not familiar with. So every year they hold a harvest festival there. There is a pumpkin weighing competition. Farmers bring their biggest pumpkins in to be weighed, and the biggest one there, gets a prize. And we're talking about pumpkins on the order of a ton. Like 2,000 pound and north of there, pumpkins. Fun, interesting. The really kind of key thing is that they then take the 1-ton pumpkins, they lift them up on a 100-foot crane and drop them. And we will link to video of this in the show notes for this episode. You know that whole meme, Eric, about this or that being oddly satisfying? That there is something oddly satisfying about watching a 1-ton pumpkin drop 100 feet and just smash apart in every possible direction. Thank you, Greg, for pointing this out to me.
2 quick thoughts, Rich. Slimy, yet satisfying. And number 2, what about all those great pies that have just gone to waste?
Well, they just mashed up the pumpkins. It's, they're ready to go. Put them in the crust and put them in the oven, man. Time to start baking. Well, that is all the time we've got for you this week on this episode of MSP Chat. Thank you so much for joining us here. We will be back again next week with another episode for you. Eric and I will actually be at 2 different conferences for that episode, which we will catch you up on then. Until then, we will remind you this is both a video and an audio podcast, which means that if you are listening to us in the audio version of the show, but you'd like to check us out on video, go to YouTube, look for MSP Chat. You're going to find us there if you're watching us on YouTube, but you're into audio podcasts. Go to Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever it is, you're going to find us there too. And however you find us, wherever you do, please subscribe, rate, review. It's going to help other people like you find and enjoy the show. This show is produced by the great Russ Johns. It is edited by the great Riley Simpson. They are part of the team at Channel Master. They are ready, willing, and able to create a podcast for you. Podcasts are just a tiny, tiny part of what we do for our clients at Channel Master, though. If you want to learn more about everything we do, please go to www.channelmaster.com. Channel Master has a sister organization called MSP Master. That is Eric, working directly with MSPs to help them grow and optimize their business. You can learn more about that business at www.mspmaster.com. So once again, thank you very much for joining us here at DattoCon. We're going to see you in a week's time. Until then, please, ladies and gentlemen, always remember, you can't spell channel without MSP.